اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق الإنسان من علق اقرأ وربك الأكرم الذي علم بالقلم علم
Next, the author will be discussing the Sifaat, the characteristics of the letters. If we page to page 18, we will see on that small diagram the explanation or the tafsir that Ali radiallahu anhu gives for tartil. In the verse وَرَتِّلِ الْقُرْآنَ تَرْتِيلًا, he explains what tartil means, and he gives the explanation تَجْوِيدُ الْحُرُوفِ وَمَعْرِفَةُ الْوُقُوفِ. And what does تَجْوِيدُ الْحُرُوفِ entail? And as we can see, makharij. One part of تَجْوِيدُ الْحُرُوفِ, learning the huruf, is the makharij, and that is what we covered so far. Now we will go on to the Sifaat. And as you can see, it is broken down there. We will be discussing that from now on. Coming back to the main lesson, on page 25. Sifaat is the plural of sifa. Literally, it means qualities or characteristics. Technically, sifat are those characteristics which are affixed to the pronunciation of a letter, whether intrinsic or circumstantial. The sifat of the letters are of two types. Number one, the sifat lazimah, intrinsic or permanent sifat. These sifat form part of the makeup of the letter. In essence, the letter cannot be found without these sifat. Number two, the sifat aridah, temporary or circumstantial sifat. In some conditions, these sifat are found, and in other conditions, they are not. The sifat lazimah, they are divided into two types. As we can see, if we go back to the diagram, we'll also, it will be more clear what they mean. The sifat lazima is divided into two types. Number one, mutadadda, those sifat which have opposites, and the ghayr mutadadda, those sifat which have no opposites. The mutadadda, because these sifat are lazima, it is impossible that any letter of the Arabic alphabet be found without these sifat. And due to them being opposites, it is also impossible that both opposite sifat are found in any one letter. Thus, all letters of the Arabic alphabet must have one of these pairs of sifat. And what we can do is, after learning these sifat, we can now pair them with the makharij that we learned. So we learn the makharij and we try to incorporate the sifat as we are trying to pronounce the makharij. So what are these sifat? They are, number one, hams. Hams. It literally means a whisper. The breath flows when pronouncing the letters of hams. It has 10 letters found in the combination فَحَثَّهُ شَخْصٌ سَكَتْ. فَحَثَّهُ شَخْصٌ سَكَتْ. So what we can do is, when we're trying to pronounce these or trying to find the sifat of hams, we can place our hand in front of our mouth about 2 inches, and we will feel when we're pronouncing these letters, we will feel a slight flow, a very soft flow of breath coming out of our mouth when we're pronouncing these letters. Let's take one letter, for example, the fa, make it sakin. Again, we do the same method. We make it sakin and we put a fatha on a hamza before it, and we try to pronounce it. So af, 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 if. We should feel a very slight flow of breath when we're trying to pronounce this letter with the sifat. Ah, for example, let's take ha. Ah, We should feel that slight flow of breath. Similarly with tha and so on, and we should try it with all the letters. By memorizing the small combination, we have memorized all the letters of hams. Number 2, and this is the opposite, jahar. Jahar. It literally means to announce something loudly or publicly. This is the opposite of hams. The breath is imprisoned when pronouncing these letters. The letters of jahar are all the remaining letters of the Arabic alphabet besides the letters of hams. So if we learn the letters of hams, automatically we know the letters of jahar, and it is the total opposite of hams. Jahar imprisons the breath, so there's no flow of breath when pronouncing a letter of hams. Let's take a letter of hams, for example. Let's take the ba. There's no ba in hams, so ba would be jahar. So let's see if there's a flow of a when trying to pronounce ba. Ab. See, there's no natural soft flow of a. Ub. See, there's more imprisonment of our a and flow of a when trying to pronounce the letter ba. So therefore it has jahar. Number 3, shidda. Shidda. It literally means strength. The sound is imprisoned when reading these letters. Its letters are found in the combination ajidu qattin bakat. So if you notice the first two sifat, they have to do with the flow of breath. Now the third sifa, shidda, they're speaking about sound. It's something that we need to listen. Sound. The sound is imprisoned when reading these letters. So the letters are ajidu qattin bakat. Let's take a letter, for example. Let's take the jim or the qaf or the ta, any letter, and try to hear for the sound, if it's carrying on or what's happening. So let's make it sakin. So aj. So the very first thing that my tongue is doing, it is imprisoning the sound. It is holding the sound back. It is not allowing the sound to carry on. Aj, ij. So if you can I'm just emphasizing on the first part so that you hear how the sound is being kept back. Aj. Or let's take qaf, aq. Automatically the tongue, how it's lifting up, it is stopping the sound from carrying on. There's no flow, there's no subtlety. It is very hard. Hence the name shidda. It is imprisoning the sound. It is not allowing it to flow very easily. So these letters are ajidu qattin bakat, and we can try with all these letters, inshallah. I like to point out there is one error or some reciters have when pronouncing the kaf and the ta. As we can see, they exist in the shidda, bakat, and in hams, sakat. So when a person pronounces the kaf and the ta, there will be hams and there is shidda. So hams, there is a flow of breath, and shidda, you need to imprison the sound. So let's take kaf for example. Let us apply hams when pronouncing the kaf. So ak. So there should be a slight flow of a when pronouncing the kaf. If a person must read bi'akwab, so it shouldn't be bi'akwab. There needs to be a flow of a, bi'akwab. That slight flow, that is hams. So where is the shidda then? The shidda would be the first part in trying to pronounce the kaf. So bi'ak, that's the shidda, and k, bi'ak. that is the hams. بأكواب, so the first part you are making amal, or you are incorporating the shidda بأك, and the k بأك, that would be the second part, which is the hams. So coming on to ta, the same thing. So with ta, you would apply the exact same thing. The first part would be the shidda, the imprisonment of the sound, and the second part, ta, would be the hams. For example, we would say إذا الشمس كورت. So when we say ta كورت, there is the shidda. The sound is being imprisoned. كورت, and then following that immediately is the hams. كورت. So it's a very slight flow of air that needs to take place in order to give the hams its due. And another example, كذبت. So the first part, what's happening is there's imprisonment of the sound. That is where the shidda comes in, and immediately following that, a slight flow of air. كذبت ثمود كذبت. The slight flow of air, that is the hams. Now, where some make error is they over exaggerate the hams, and this leads to reading a complete scene. Example, they would say كذبت, or إذا الشمس كورت. So this is an exaggeration. This is overemphasizing to the extent that they are not making hams and actually reading a scene, which is obviously incorrect, because you are adding a letter. And if a person adds a letter, as we learned previously, it is lahan, jali. A person cannot add, and it is haram. So this is over exaggerating the hams in the ta. And if one implements this habit in ta, if he says كذبت or إذا الشمس كورت, then why doesn't it exist in the kaf? A person cannot articulate the kaf with those sifat in the very same way, because that it should be consistent. If a person says kuwirat, he should make the same sound in the kaf, and that is obviously impossible. It's because it's inconsistent. So therefore, one should abstain from overemphasizing the hams in the ta. It is just a slight flow of breath. Moving on. Number 4, which is now the opposite of shidda, the rikhwa or rakhawa. It literally means softness. So this is the opposite of shidda. The sound flows. The sound flows when pronouncing the letters which have rakhawa. And rakhawa is all the letters other than the letters of ajidu, qattin, bakat. Let's take dhal, for example. So let's try to pronounce dhal. So adh, adh, th, th. We can hear the sound carries on. It's not imprisoned. It's not held back by anything as hard as the letters of shidda. Adh, idh, udh. So the sound is carrying on. Let's take tha. Ath, ith, uth. See the sound, it carries on, and this is what rakhawa refers to. Rikhwa or rakhawa. There's a small point to know. Tawassut or bayniyah. It literally means in between. This sifa is in between shidda and rakhawa. Its sound does not flow as in rakhawa, nor is it imprisoned as in shidda. Its letters are lin, umar. So these 5 letters, they have somewhat of both the shidda and rakhawa. They're not as hard as shidda, they're not as soft as rakhawa. There's a little bit of both. So they, as the author mentions in the note, the letters of rakhawa are all the letters besides the letters of shidda. Ajidu qatin bakat and tawassut. So you're not going to add the tawassut, these letters, lin umar, in any one of them. And note, in the next note, the author says tawassut is not an independent sifa because it has a bit of shidda and a bit of rakhawa. For this reason, it is not counted as an individual sifa. So let's just take these three letters, let's test them if they have a little bit of shidda or rakhawa in them. Let's take the lam. So when you're trying to pronounce lam, if you make it sakin, al, al. So very slightly, to a certain extent, there is some holding back of the sound al. But like he says, not as hard as shidda. It is still going to flow. But at the same time, it's not, the sound of lam is not flowing as freely as a letter of rakhawa, like fa, for example, af. It's very soft and it flows very easily. But the author is saying it does not have that flow. It doesn't flow like the letters of rakhawa. So therefore, they are in between. Lam, the noon, an, in. So there is some restriction when pronouncing the noon, but at the same time, it is not as hard as shidda, but it doesn't flow also as the letter of rakhawa. And similarly with all the letters of lin umar, these 5 letters, lin umar, if we learn the combinations, we learn the letters. So lin umar is the letters of tawassut or bayniyah. It is not an independent sifa, but it has a little bit of both rakhawa and shidda. Moving on, number 5, isti'la. Isti'la. It literally means to elevate. The back part of the tongue rises when pronouncing the letters which have the sifa. It is found in the 7 letters of khussa, ضغط, قض. So isti'la, what is happening? So this is something we need to feel. The back part of the tongue. The back part of our tongue, it is going to rise up and it is going to lift when pronouncing these letters. No matter what haraka the letter carries, whether it's a fatha, kasra or a dhamma, the back part of the tongue needs to rise up. So let's take the kha, khi, khu. Even in pronouncing a kasra, it is very important to know when pronouncing a kasra on these letters, especially the kha and the ghain, it shouldn't be empty like khi or ri, but rather the tongue, the back portion of the tongue needs to rise up when pronouncing these letters, even if it has a kasra. So khi, and ri. So especially these 2 letters, because a person can read, for example, sometimes he will read khira, not knowing that there is isti'la, there's a intrinsic permanent sifa in these letters, and it has to be pronounced with these sifat. So let's take the sad, for example, as, is, us, or sa, si, su. We will try with all these letters, trying to implement these sifat when pronouncing them. I have to mention that these sifat would be more apparent, and you would be able to figure out them what they are more when the letter is sakin versus when they are mutaharrik. It is more strong when the letter is sakin. It is more easy to feel these sifat when they are sakin, when they are mutaharrik. So that's just one point to keep in mind. Note, due to the back part of the tongue rising, it causes these letters to be pronounced with a thick sound, tafkhim. istifal. It literally means to lower. This is the opposite of isti'la. The back part of the tongue does not rise, but instead lays low when pronouncing these letters. It is found in all the other letters besides the letters of isti'la. So this is complete opposite. The tongue will just lay flat. Let's take a letter, for example, like the lam. The lam has istifal. Why? Because when pronouncing the lam, the tongue lays flat. And also we should keep into account that one letter can have multiple sifat in them. They just won't have their opposite, their counter sifa in them at once. But one letter can have multiple sifat in them. Note, this action of the tongue causes these letters to be pronounced with an empty mouth or a thin sound, tarqiq. And some easy way also to make a letter tarqiq or to pronounce a letter empty is sometimes we can just pull our lips back. This helps, to read a letter with istifal, to read a letter with an empty sound.
وإذ قال إبراهيم